It's Friday, everyone. What do we do on Fridays here at the Hint Hive? That's right, we smash the patriarchy. Hello, my queens. Welcome back to the Hint Hive, amplifying women's voices. I'm Kelly Hint, Queen Bee of this hive, and your guide on this journey to empowerment and self-discovery. Today, we're diving into a topic that affects many women but is often misunderstood: obsessive-compulsive disorder, or more commonly known as OCD. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's break down the walls of stigma together. All right, my friends. First, let's get to know OCD. It's more than just being neat or organized. OCD is a chronic mental health condition characterized by uncontrollable, recurring thoughts, otherwise known as obsessions, and behaviors, otherwise known as compulsions, that you feel compelled to repeat. According to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, OCD affects about 2.3% of the population, which means millions of people are navigating this challenge every single day. So, what are these obsessions and compulsions? Obsessions are intrusive and unwanted thoughts, images, or urges that cause intense anxiety. These could be fears of contamination, unwanted aggressive thoughts, or even taboo sexual thoughts. Compulsions, on the other hand, are repetitive behaviors or mental acts that you feel driven to perform to ease the anxiety caused by the obsessions. Think excessive hand washing, checking things repeatedly, counting in specific patterns. I think one of the very stereotypical things would be like flipping a light switch on and off 10 times. And the thing to remember is OCD can manifest very differently. For example, I thought I just had anxiety. I thought it was a straight up anxiety disorder. Because unfortunately, I don't have the clean freak OCD, and that makes me very, very sad. Granted, I do have some germaphobe-ish OCD behaviors, but not the clean the house top to bottom every single day kind of OCD. I'm sure my husband wishes I had that one, but I don't. But anyway, I thought I just had some regular anxiety. And then it started manifesting in very different ways than the stereotypes. And the more I dove into OCD, the more trainings I went to, and I was actually diagnosed by a therapist. I started realizing, I have a little bit deeper of a problem here. So for those of you who are listening, I don't want you to self-diagnose because we can have OCD tendencies without having OCD, because the big component of having it as a true disorder is the level of functioning, the level of dysfunction that it causes in your life. When it really starts impairing things, that's when we're talking a full-blown disorder. But we can have some tendencies. So I don't want everyone listening to freak out and thinking they need to be put on medication or in intensive therapy if you see yourself in some of these things that we're going to go over. Now, without getting into the actual diagnostic criteria, because I think that would be incredibly boring and monotonous, I will just provide examples that are more easily digestible than the actual DSM. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that is used for diagnosis. I'm not going to dive into that piece. So let's just talk about some examples. So obsessions. Remember, obsessions are the intrusive and unwanted thoughts or images. So, for example, my OCD, I have several different types. So I'll talk about a couple of the types that I have, so that I can better illustrate it. So one of them is perfectionism. Now, if you are a perfectionist, it does not mean that you have OCD. But the way my OCD manifests is through my perfectionism. So we all know what perfectionists look like, right? They got to do everything right, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. Well, mine takes it to the next level. And again, I'm not saying I'm the only person with this type of OCD. I'm simply saying that just because you are a perfectionist does not mean that you have OCD. I'm going to try not to over explain everything, but I just don't want to freak anyone out after listening to this episode and everyone's running to their doctor saying that they have OCD. So again, take it all with a grain of salt. And if you have questions, please feel free to message me and we can absolutely talk about it a little bit more privately. So back to the obsessions. So how my perfectionism manifests through my obsessions is the obsessive repetitive thought for me is, okay, this thing has to be done perfectly. If it's not done perfectly, there are negative consequences. So I'm going to use my towels as an example. And if any of my therapy patients or coaching clients are listening right now, I apologize. You've probably already heard this story, but it's still fun to talk about anyway. And also there are many people who have never heard this story, so be patient. So I like my towels folded a certain way. The obsessive thought or obsession is the towels need to be perfect. So the compulsion is for me to fold them a certain way. And here's where it becomes disordered. So, because I know a lot of you out there like your towels folded a certain way. The difference here is that if my towels are not folded the exact way that I want them to be folded, my anxiety spikes and I can barely function. And I should say that this was how it used to be before I was able to overcome my OCD. And I'll talk about that later also. So the towels have to be folded a certain way. If they're not folded a certain way, I experience intense anxiety. And I know how irrational it is. I know how ridiculous it is, but it doesn't freaking matter. It does not matter that I know that I'm being ridiculous. It still causes these intense feelings. So my husband would try to be helpful and fold the towels, and he didn't do it the right way, so I would unfold them and refold them myself. And as you can imagine, that was a lot of wasted time, right? I also so in addition to the towels, I also did the same thing with loading the dishwasher. And you're going to hear me rationalize my behaviors at times, and I know I'm doing it, so I'm just putting it out there. So with the dishwasher had to be loaded a certain way because it is the most functional way. That's another piece of this perfectionism, is that everything's done perfectly, everything's done efficiently. I used to maximize the amount of things I would do on my way from the bedroom to the kitchen to be the most efficient. Like I would grab this along the way and this along the way and blah, 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 blah. It was just crazy because everything had to be so efficient, so perfect. I never wanted to waste time or anything. So anyway, the dishes had to be loaded a certain way because in our dishwasher, water pools up on top of the mugs. And so if you don't tip the mugs at an angle, there will be water pooled in it. And I would have to listen to my husband bitch about the fact that the dishwasher doesn't do its job. And I would say to him, you're not loading the dishwasher the right way. You have to load the mugs at an angle, and then the water will run off and there won't be pooling. So that's that's where I rationalize. I rationalize my obsession because it's functional. In order for the dishwasher to perform optimally, it has to be loaded in an exact way, right? So on the surface, that doesn't really sound like OCD. On the surface, it sounds like I'm just very efficient and I know what I'm doing. My OCD takes it to the next level, to the point where I would become angry that the dishes weren't loaded a certain way. I would rearrange the entire dishwasher. And this goes back many, many years before I got control of it. So back when my kids were still living in the home, it was not about the efficiency of the dishwasher, because we lived in a different home at that time. It was about the way things were arranged. I wanted them a certain way. I was so rigid, and I would get angry, and I wouldn't yell at my kids or anything, and I wouldn't yell at my husband about it. I would just rearrange everything, and I would tell them that they're doing it wrong. Well, I had this epiphany. I can't go around fixing everything that everyone in the house is doing. So after learning that this was OCD behavior, I had to learn how to function differently. But I'm going to get to that later when we talk about how to actually deal with OCD. So just keep in mind, I was a crazy nut job going around and redoing everything that everyone did because they weren't doing it right. And here's the other piece of this. The OCD part, the rigidity that I had, was creating dysfunction in my relationships with my family. I had frustrated feelings towards my family members because they weren't doing it the right way, the perfect way. And as you can imagine, this builds and builds and builds over years. So back to the towels. They had to be folded a certain way. They weren't done the right way. I would be upset. The anxiety would increase. And one of the other even more ridiculous manifestations of my OCD, I have some matching behaviors. So, and again, apologies. I know some of you have heard this. So let's say I buy a 6-pack of white socks. They are all the exact same socks, same pattern, like, you know, the ribbing on them is the same. There's literally nothing different about these 6 pairs of socks. Well, I knew which two went together. So let's say I wore white socks with black boots. You could tell on the bottom that I wore them with black boots because maybe there was a little bit of discoloration. And then maybe I wore these other pair of white socks with brown boots, and the color on the bottom was a little bit different, you know, after wearing them. I could not wear 2 of the exact same white socks if I knew that they were not worn together originally. Like, I couldn't take one white sock from the one I wore with the black boots and another white sock with the one I wore with the brown boots. I could not wear them together. See, this is ridiculous, isn't it? And then, like, bras and underwear. I could not wear mismatched bras and underwear. Now, I'm not fancy, okay? So I don't have all these matching sets of lingerie. I don't have, like, any of that. Especially now as a 50-year-old woman, I do not give one crap about that, of having all this, like, sexy stuff. If you're in your 50s and you love it, do it, girl. Like, I'm not, it's just not me. I'm not judging. I'm just saying how I experienced this. But anyway, I could not wear like an orange bra with red underwear, because they don't match. They clash. It doesn't look good together. So like everything. And then my outfits, oh my gosh, this is one I still struggle with and I have to talk myself through every day. I like to accessorize and I like to match everything to the point where, so I bought these glasses from Pair Eyewear and you can switch out the toppers on them. Oh my gosh, I have a topper that matches my purse. I have these silver sparkly toppers that match my silver sparkly shoes, and I make it a whole thing. It is obnoxious. I'm the person that people make fun of, okay? So in the other big one that I have is and this one's so stupid too. I have to have the volume on the TV or the radio be a certain number. And it makes no sense to anyone but me. So I like even numbers, right? Like it's got to be on 10 or 12 or 22, like, but also there's another piece of this that makes it ridiculous. I can have it as like 15 or 30 or 45 because that makes sense to this weird pattern in my brain where it's like in 15-minute chunks, or I can have it on the fives, like 5, 10, 15, 20. It only makes sense to me. And even I know it is so incredibly ridiculous. But there have been times where my husband and I are riding around in my car and he'll adjust the volume and he puts it on like 13. And so I try to be really subtle and I reach over and I put it on 14. And after being together for over 30 years, he's got my number. It's no longer subtle anymore. And he thinks I'm ridiculous. And to be honest, so do I. So these are just some of the very light manifestations of my OCD. It goes deeper, it goes darker, but I'm not going to talk about that because that's all stuff that I've gotten through. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of OCD before I talk to you about how I worked through some of that. So, I mean, obviously, for those of you who struggle with this, you already know this, but living with OCD can be tough, and it can seriously impact your daily functioning. Imagine trying to focus at work while battling constant intrusive thoughts, or being unable to leave the house because you need to check if the door is locked just one more time. It's exhausting and can lead to significant distress. This was one of the things that I began to struggle with. I had a hard time getting ready in the morning, leaving the house, because I was struggling with matching my outfits a certain way. And I would stand in my closet and just stare and try to match everything up perfectly. Like if there was a certain shade of blue in a shirt, I needed shoes that were that exact same blue. So it was, I'm telling you, so exhausting. And then let's talk relationships. OCD can create friction in your personal relationships. Your partner or your family might not understand why you need to perform certain rituals, or they might feel hurt if you're constantly seeking reassurance from them or constantly correcting things because they're not doing it right. Communication can become very, very strained, and social activities can even seem daunting. And, like I was saying earlier, it started affecting my relationships. My husband and I would bicker about really stupid things because of my anxiety, because of my OCD, the anxiety stemming from the OCD when things weren't done a certain way. And again, I recognized that I was telling my kids, you're not doing that right. You're not folding that right. You're not loading that right. But here's the thing. OCD, believe it or not, is manageable. Yes, you heard me right. With the right strategies and support, you can take control. So let's dive into some of these badass practical strategies for managing OCD. So the very first piece, education is power. Knowledge is your first line of defense. Understanding OCD helps to demystify it. Read books, listen to podcasts like this one, and join support groups. Knowing that you're not alone can be incredibly empowering. That is the first thing that I did, was I gained more knowledge about OCD so that I could understand why I was a crazy freak. Now, again, I'm not calling you guys a crazy freak. I'm calling me. I felt like a crazy freak. But then when I started to understand more about it, I stopped feeling, I stopped feeling less freakish, and I was able to start taking control. The next thing, therapy works. So cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, specifically exposure and response prevention, otherwise known as ERP, is the gold standard for treating OCD. ERP, that's the exposure and response prevention, it involves exposing yourself to the source of your anxiety and then resisting the urge to perform the compulsive behavior. It's tough, but it is incredibly effective. And for me, you know what? I'm going to go through this list first, and then I'm going to go talk about it. How I applied it. So the next one, mindfulness and meditation. So practicing mindfulness helps you stay grounded in the present moment. When intrusive thoughts pop up, you acknowledge them without judgment and you let them pass, kind of like clouds in the sky. And honestly, apps like Headspace and Calm, they are great tools for starting your mindfulness journey. That's actually, when I worked at an addiction clinic, I used to play clips from Headspace in one of the groups that I ran. It was amazing. The people who attended my groups really started to look forward to doing their Headspace meditation in the group every week. It was fantastic. I loved it. And then let's talk about some healthy lifestyle choices. I hope I don't sound like a broken record here, but your mind and your body are connected. Regular exercise, a balanced diet, and adequate sleep, believe it or not, can significantly impact your mental health. Physical activity releases endorphins, which are natural mood lifters. It's like taking an antidepressant. And when you feed your body with the good stuff, it puts out more of the good stuff. And then the next one is one that a lot of people don't like to hear, but limit alcohol and caffeine. Both can exacerbate anxiety and OCD symptoms. Moderation is key. If you notice a spike in symptoms after a night out or drinking an entire pot of coffee, it might be worth cutting back. That's actually one of the things that I had to do, was moderate my caffeine intake. So now I only drink 1 cup of caffeine a day. The next piece, create a support system. So surround yourself with understanding and supportive people. Share your struggles with trusted friends or family. Their support can be a lifeline during the tough times. And then medication may be an option. For some people, medication can be a game changer. The selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as SSRIs, are commonly prescribed for OCD. Talk to your doctor about your options and what might work best for you. But I would say, and again, this is the therapist in me saying this, medication alone, I don't recommend that. Your doctor may recommend it, but as a therapist, I'm telling you, the pills aren't magic. There are other things that you need to work on besides just taking medication. For example, I know a lot of people, after a death in the family, for example, they may go on antidepressants and they wonder why they're still sad. It's because you lost someone. Of course you're going to be sad. It's not a magic pill. It may help things become more manageable, but there are other things in addition to medication that you need. So let me go back and just give some examples of these 7 different ways of managing OCD that I have done myself. So like I said, the first one, education. I did that. I already talked about that, so I won't go over that again. And the next one, therapy. So I went to a therapist who helped to educate me on my specific manifestations of OCD, and that was really, really helpful. But the therapist never did exposure and response prevention with me. And so I still struggled with OCD. Unfortunately, I didn't pursue that further with the therapist. It was only through my own experiences as a therapist, I actually started doing ERP on myself without knowing it. I discovered what it was that I was doing at a training that I went to like 10 years later. So, one of the things that I used to do, and this was while I was working at that addiction clinic that I told you about. So, at that clinic, I worked with people who had both mental health and substance use issues, and I ran a coping skills group. And I recognized throughout my experience as a therapist that every single day I was asking people to do really uncomfortable things. And I wanted to feel what they felt. So I needed to make myself uncomfortable, because if I'm asking someone to do something, I need to feel it too. Because again, it helps me to empathize and understand. So I used to wear 2 mismatched socks to work. Now I had to start with doing I would do the 2 exact same white socks, but they didn't go together. They weren't the original pairs, right? So for example, one that I wore with brown boots, one that I wore with black boots, I would wear them. Then I upped it. I started wearing like a green sock and a blue sock. And let me tell you, when I did that, it was tough because I had to literally sit through my entire day knowing that I had a blue sock and a green sock on. And at first it drove me a little crazy, but I had to learn how to get through that. And I did through the use of my coping skills. And then I started mismatching bras and underwear. I started not color coordinating my outfit down to the very, minute detail. And guess what? I got through it. I survived. The world did not end because I wore a blue sock on one foot and a green sock on the other. So what I was doing was I was doing exposure and response prevention to myself. And I didn't know it until about 15 years later when I decided I wanted to specialize in OCD. And I went to some pretty intensive trainings to learn more about it. And I got a little frustrated because I'm like, why was this never done in my therapy? Well, if you want to overcome certain things, sometimes you need to go to somebody who specializes in this stuff because they have a deeper understanding of the evidence-based practices that can help. So another thing I do in my coaching program is I'm an ERP coach. So I help people through exposures and response prevention. Sometimes I go to a store with someone because they are too freaked out to do a grocery shopping trip on their own. And we go through it together. And I help them to not do the compulsion that helps to ease their anxiety. It's great. It's really fun work. And then the mindfulness and meditation, I told you, like I started doing the Headspace app myself, and I liked it so much that I started doing it with my groups. And I started exercising more, eating better foods to just be healthier overall. And then again, that I had to limit my caffeine intake. At one point, I was drinking more than a full pot of coffee a day, and I was just on edge all the time. I was having panic attacks, and my anxiety was out of control. So I cut down to 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and then coffee started hating me, so now I drink tea. I have 1 cup of tea in the morning, and that's it. And it helps. It's not a cure, but it's one of the things that helps. And as far as a support system, my husband is a great support for me because he knows all of my quirky stuff, and he doesn't judge me for it because I educated him on some of the things that I was going through. And so, he's able to kind of call me out when he sees that my OCD is getting a little bit unmanageable. Now, I never went on medication because it never got to a point where I couldn't control it myself. But I have worked with people who have needed medication, and it's been a game changer for them. So to kind of wrap up my experience, I recognized within my daily experience, I recognized that I could no longer expect my family to do things the way I wanted them to do because it wasn't rational. It was my OCD. It was not, they weren't doing anything wrong. It was my thought process that was messed up. And so I said to myself, well, if I want the dishes to be loaded a certain way, and if I want the towels to be folded a certain way, and I can't handle the way they do it, then I'm going to have to do it myself. And so I started doing that. And then I recognized, wait a minute, I cannot do everything all by myself. I need some help. So part of my own, again, exposure and response prevention therapy was to let people load the damn dishwasher without me rearranging it. And so I did that. And it's been working fine over the past decade or so. Except when my husband complains about the damn water pooling up on the mugs. Then if I notice that he has not loaded a mug the right way, I do rearrange it. But other than that, now I will say I kept the towels for myself because, and this is the thing, I get to decide. It's my life. I get to decide what I'm going to hang on to and what I'm going to work on. I have decided that I want to keep the towels because let me tell you, when I open the closet door and I see perfectly stacked towels that look beautiful, there is just something that soothes me about it. And again, I know it's ridiculous, but I can't help it. It's a mental health issue, you know? But again, it's one that I've decided in that particular area, I'm not messing with it. I'm going to leave it because it makes me feel good and I get to choose. So that's what I've held on to. I've held on to the towels because I've decided that I'm working on so many damn other things in my life. I don't need to be perfect. And that's the other piece. It's kind of, it sounds weird, but not part of my perfectionism is trying to be perfect. And so my OCD wants me to be perfect. And so I'm allowing myself to be imperfect by having my OCD manifest with folding towels. I do not know if that made any sense to anyone other than me. But that I can't figure out how to explain it any other way. So let's have some final thoughts on this, okay? I need you to remember, my dear, dear warriors, my dear Hive listeners, that managing OCD is a journey. It is about progress, not perfection. Celebrate your victories, no matter how small, and be kind to yourself on the tough days. You are so much stronger than you think, and you have the power to conquer OCD. And if you or someone you know is struggling with OCD, do not hesitate to seek help. Reach out to a mental health professional, a coach, join support groups, and educate yourself. You are not alone, and together we can break the stigma. And as always, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on this journey. And I really hope that this was helpful for some of you. If you're noticing some of these challenges yourself. And again, feel free to reach out. There's no shame. I don't want you to think that you are in this alone. So please, if you have any questions, reach out to me. If you're in New York and you need to see me for therapy, reach out to me. If you just need a coach, if you don't think you need therapy, then absolutely just reach out. We can have that conversation together. If you just want to brush up on your coping skills and you don't want to do therapy, you don't want to do coaching, grab my book. There's some very practical coping skills in that book, and you can actually, the link to it is in the podcast description. So please just remember, you're not alone in whatever mental health challenge that you may be dealing with. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Ladies, stay badass, stay empowered, and remember, your voice matters. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with the incredible women in your life. Feel free to follow me on social media for more empowering content. And as always, keep shining, and I will see you in the next episode. This podcast is powered by Kelly Hint Empowerment Coaching, as well as Kelly M. Hint LMHC and The Cranky Counselor. To find out more about coaching services, head over to CoachKellyHint.com. If you'd like to know more about the psychotherapy services I offer to individuals within the state of New York, you can check out KellyMHint.com. And if you'd like to learn more about aromatherapy, you can check out TheCrankyCounselor.com.